Hi, my name's Ian Wallace. I call myself the Messed Up Counsellor, which is quite an intriguing name. And the podcast you're about to see is one of many, and we've been doing about a year now. So you can look back and see all the things we've talked about with guests and on my own over the process. A lot of the information I use in the podcast initially came from the first book I wrote in 2011. Why do we do that? What do we do about it? And that came out and was the basis of all my learning, understanding at that time, which is going back a few years now. And that process of understanding how the world works for people, how we can alter, change, and adapt it, was kind of what it was there to do at the initial stages. I've made that now an audiobook as well, so it's available on Amazon as an audio file that you can check out and you can download to your heart's content, and hopefully that will be helpful. In the podcasts, we're trying to look at all sorts of things about human interactions, human dynamics, the world, and how we might understand it more or change it more. So it gives you lots of ideas and tools in order to think about and look at different ways of being or dealing with things. And hopefully that brings people together and makes people more able to connect and communicate. Lots of topics. If you ever want to connect to me, just obviously drop me a comment on the podcast and I shall try as much as possible to reply. And if you've got any ideas of things that we might want to use on the podcasts, then please let me know. My name's Ian Wallace. Thanks for looking and thanks for listening. Hi, and welcome to another Messed Up Counsellor podcast. My name's Ian Wallace. Tonight, what I'd like to have a think about is ageing and the work ethic. Something that's been on my mind, as you can imagine, getting to the age of 70. That's becoming more and more of a feature in my thoughts, my ideas, what I want to do. Now, luckily, I'm in a role, a job, a process whereby I enjoy what I do. I don't see it as work necessarily. It is, because obviously I earn a living from it, and it takes up so much of my time during the week. But it doesn't feel like work. When I was in corporate world many years ago, I used to, God, it's Monday, I've got to go and go to work and all that kind of stuff at 5 o'clock in the morning or whatever time it used to be. And it was to do for a living, to make income, to pay bills, to have a life, holidays, whatever. And so now it's different for me in a sense that, and anybody that's self-employed probably will have this idea, is that if it is something that you enjoy, it's not easy to give up. And sometimes it's going to be hard for me to retire, as we call it. And I don't know whether or not that would be something that other people are thinking of, if you're watching this podcast. And retirement is at different ages for different people, obviously, and whatever your circumstances are. But when we're looking at aging and we're looking at still enjoying what we do, still being valuable in what we do, then it's not as easy as, well, I've got to 65 or I've got to 60 or whatever our retirement age is with the work we do. And that's a matter of course. Sometimes when I've seen people in the counselling room, they've come from that process where there is an age to retire that is dictated by an organisation or our employer or whoever. Although less so nowadays, which is not necessarily a bad thing, as long as you're not trying to lump bricks up ladders at the age of 68, which some people probably will have to do, which is not necessarily a good thing. But as we get older, as we get that retirement age coming into focus, I find a lot of times people that contact me after they've retired is because they haven't had ideas, thoughts, or processes of what they may do after that point. What is their life going to be like? They just get to retirement age and they retire. So there's no kind of retirement planning. There might be financial planning, but there's no planning of what is going to make our world worth living. What are we going to get that's going to be valuable, or entertain us, or make us feel important? And that can be really hard. It can be really hard for us as the retiree, obviously, because we'd still need to fill our life with something, a role, a responsibility. We might lose a position, might lose a role, a kind of important aspect of our world and our life that we were looked up to, or we were kind of like elevated in our sense of self. And that can be really hard when that ends. So as we're working towards retirement, whenever that is, and if you're employed, it might be different if you're self-employed. But if you're employed, that's something that's going to be given to you. You might not have a choice in it, as I've said. So with employed people, you do need to do some pre-awareness, pre-thought, and not just, a week before you retire, probably a year before you retire, to have ideas of what do I do with it, where do I do that, how do I fill my time, how do I feel fulfilled. If you have a relationship partner that's with you in that process, then be mindful that it's going to change the relationship, and not always in an easy way. People who are now together 24/7, which they wouldn't have been if they were working, that can really put a pressure on the relationship, without either one being a particularly a bad person, or but it can really change the dynamics. And you do need to have some thought about that. What's it going to be like when? How are we going to manage that? What we're going to do with that? Now, most people, as I've said, will do the financial retirement plan. They'll know that they're okay, they can survive, they can be okay. But they don't do the kind of relationship plan as such. And dependent on the age difference of the people that's involved in that relationship, if you've got one that's kind of 65 and one that's, say, 55, then the person that's still working possibly will not want to just give up, and will not have the time to just go off and plan holidays or go away for 2 or 3 months at a time, or whatever it is that you're thinking of in your retirement. So they may still have that responsibility, they may still have that structure. And so having that conversation, having that plan as to what is it going to look like, how are we going to do that, what do we want from it, those kind of conversations, ideas. Now, if you're self-employed like me, should I say, then it's going to be a different process, because self-employed people usually are quite invested in what they do. We define when we're going to work, how we're going to work, and what we're going to do, basically. That we have no boss or nobody in charge of us that's telling us what to do. So in my situation, it's not necessarily a time of an age, a date, if you like. Might have to come down to that. We might have to make decisions on that process. But more often than not, it's when do I feel that I don't want to do this anymore, maybe? Or when do I feel I can't do this anymore? Those kind of conversations. Now, we might look more at the financial aspect of being self-employed, because we don't have company pensions and those kind of things. So we might be that we do need to be still financially earning in order to retain the lifestyle, as a process. So from that point of view, there'll be more decisions to be made, more conversations to think about, more flexibility, if you like, within what we do. And again, we'll have the same ideas about what do I fill my time with, what do I do. Certainly in the roles I have as a counsellor, therapist, is I have a need to be needed, and most counsellors, therapists do, which is not a bad thing. We don't want it in every part of our life, obviously, because that would be a bit weird. But we do have it in our roles and our work, our ethic. process. So we might need to fill our time with something else that values us, that makes us feel needed. So just letting go and saying, okay, that's ended, isn't usually a good idea for anybody, whether you're self-employed or employed. There'll be different conversations that you might need to have from that process, but most people will be able to navigate through that. In my circumstance and situation, I'm not sure I've got a date when everything ends. I've got ideas of dates. As I say, I'm coming up to 70 now. So from that point of view, I'm that stage of life, if you like. But how I manage that will take some planning. It's not just going to happen. It'd be very, very different if I just said, right, okay, next February everything's going to stop. I might do, but I might not. And as we get older, we age, our bodies age, our health usually has some issues. I don't think many people get to 70 and they've got no issues with their body or their health or their mental health. We will have something that is impacting on us in some way, shape or form. Even if it's just the energy to do what I do will be reduced. So it might be that our bodies, our kind of framework, if you like, does restrict what we can do and how we can do. So we might need to factor that in. We might need to factor in, well, getting older, and there's going to be a point in time when I can't do this, I can't do that. I won't be able to maybe drive. I might not be able to kind of do work for myself. There's going to be a whole range of things because of that, which is an unknown, quite naturally. But the one sure thing is, as we age, our bodies don't heal as fast, usually. And they do creak and groan, and our muscles and our bones and all those kind of things become a lot more sensitive to all sorts of things. So from that point of view, natural deterioration, if you like, will occur. And as we don't know when that's going to happen or how often that's going to happen or how big a process that's going to be, how intense a process that's going to be, then we do need to have a think about, okay, let's try and do that before that occurs. So it's not a case of, that's going to dictate to me and control me. It's a case of, well, okay, I'm going to put that in place. So there's some ideas around the work and the ethics of work and what we do with that. And as I say, most people above 60, 65 would start thinking about those things because it's natural, it's normal, it's another journey of life, so to speak. And I think if we can think about those things, if we can have conversations with other people that might be affected by it, and we plan as much as we can, and we can't plan for everything, world's the world, sometimes stuff happens without any conversation with us. It just picks you up in one place and puts you down another. And we have no control over that. So if we can plan it, then have a structure, have some kind of planned program of what that's going to look like, what it's going to be fulfilled by afterwards, and how you're going to manage that. Because if you just get to that point and you either have to retire, maybe because of ill health or some other situation, then at least if you have an idea what you were going to do, that can be brought forward if need be, and you can then go into that planned program earlier than you might have wanted to, but it gives you an idea of some structure, something that you are in control of. Human beings like control. We do. And we like to know where we are. We like security and safety. We don't like insecurity. We're usually not able to just be a free agent. We need some kind of structure, some kind of boundaries. some kind of platform to know where we are. And if we've got that, we feel better. So if the world just grabs you and changes it because of ill health or because of some other situation, then if you haven't got that idea or that process in mind, that you can't plan completely to, obviously, because stuff happens. But if you have an idea of what it might look like, it will help you going forward. And it'll help the people around you, because we never know when things are going to change. That is one of the things about life. And if we have something in mind, something that we've at least thought about, even if we haven't planned it, then it will give us that sense of more security, more safety, more structure. Retirement should be a good thing. Aging, hopefully, is a positive process, but it does have a lot of variance, a lot of issues as we get older. And sometimes getting older is not old. Sometimes getting older is a young person getting to the point where they can't do things that they used to do for all sorts of reasons, which is tragic, quite naturally. But if we have that sense of what would happen and how I'd relate to it, what I would do with it, some kind of plan, program, as I've said, it will make it easier for us to cope with it if and when it does occur. I'm in that process now, as I've said. I'm getting to nearly 70. So it's becoming more of my thoughts, more of ideas, more of my what do I do when, what do I do if, when does that happen, how does that happen. And I'm putting that program together now because it's good to do so. But it's still going to be uncertain, because nobody knows what the future holds, unfortunately, or maybe fortunately. I don't know if I'd like the future if I knew what it held. It's good and bad in everything. But as we're processing that, as we're looking towards it, and we're creating those plans, those ideas, then it will make us feel more comfortable. And if we share them with other people, then at least they know where we want to be when we get to that point and how that's going to look. So they can help us, they can support us, they can be there for us. And if it's a relationship partner, then they will have input on that, because it's going to affect their world, their life. So those conversations really need to happen. And a long time before you think it's needed, usually. If you're in that process where life has picked you up and dropped you somewhere completely different, then my heart goes out to you. It really does, because that's not an easy place to be. If you've still got that choice availability, then take this as being a point in time where you start going to have to think about that, and use this podcast as a kind of a wake-up call, because that will be helpful for everybody, including yourselves. And if you know anybody that's in that position, that can make some plans, make some process and some structure, and then maybe share this podcast with them, because maybe it's going to give them ideas that they haven't thought about, or maybe didn't want to think about. It's not easy to contemplate retiring. It isn't easy for me, to be fair, and I don't know if I'll retire. I've still got all those things to think about over the next year. But it isn't easy, because it does change our world massively. But it is something that's helpful to do. So in that sense, know that there will be fears, worries, concerns about retiring or changes that are going to occur. And give people support, give people encouragement, give them a voice so they have a choice, and then help them with the process, whatever that is. Hopefully all that made sense. And please share, like, subscribe to the podcast, because it does help other people to understand how things might be looked at different in their worlds and life. My name's Ian Wallace. I'm the Messed Up Counsellor. Take care. Hi, thanks for listening to the podcast, and hopefully it made sense and was interesting for you. Please subscribe, like, and share. With the podcasts, you never know who will be helped by the things we talk about, things we share. We don't normally tell people our problems, but by sharing it and helping other people to understand things. The book Insecurity, It's All About Me, is also available now through Amazon. And it gives you an understanding of what drives insecurity, how insecurity works within our human dynamics, and how you can get a much more secure connection with people. It gives you lots of ideas and thoughts, which is really good. So thanks for listening. Subscribe, like, share, hit the button. And if you've got any comments, please give me them and I'll do my best to answer them. Thanks very much. Take care.